Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Welcome to session 2 from the wonderful book of Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala. We're in the first unit, and that is the unit of wahi, revelation. And revelation means, how did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveal to the Prophet alayhi salatu wa salam the information necessary to preach the message, right? And here we start with the hadith from Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, who says that Al-Harith ibn Hisham, a companion radiallahu ta'ala an, asked the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, how did wahi come to you? How did revelation come to you? Now remember, we human beings, we function based on what our brain can perceive, right? And what our brains can perceive is according to our senses. And in our times today, or at least in the West, the senses are glorified in an exaggerated way, right? In an exaggerated way. What do I mean by that? What I mean is they have this notion, this belief, if I don't hear it, smell it, taste it, touch it, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. And what's interesting is that Ibn Khaldun, rahimahullah ta'ala, the great sociologist of Islam, he traveled the world to study societies. And he said the major difference, the primary difference between East and West. When we say West, we're talking about Rome, what we call now today Europe and America. And the East, we're talking about Persia, China, the Asia, Central Asia, etc. I said the primary difference between these two societies is the belief in the tangible. The West will only believe in the tangible, whereas the East is drawn towards that which cannot be perceived. So you'll find in all the Eastern societies, this, got to be careful of the evil eye, right? You got to be careful of, the jinn, and they gravitate to this. Whereas in the West, it's like, this is all silly. This is a primary difference. Now Islam is what? Moderate. It's balanced between the two. Al-Asl, the initial belief is that which is tangible, right? That which we cannot perceive, we believe if Allah tells us. If Allah tells us. So for example, we believe that Isa alayhi salam was born from a mother without a father. Now scientifically, is this possible? Biologically speaking, is this possible? It's impossible, right? If somebody came to us and said, right, a pregnant lady came and said, the child just came, no father is involved, would we believe her? Absolutely not. Yet we believe Maryam alayhi salam bore a child without a man involved. Why? Because Allah told us. We believe in the jinn, right? We believe in the evil eye. We believe in black magic. Why? Because Allah and His Messenger told us. That's why. Had they not told us of it, we would not believe it, right? So this is how Islam balances the two. And Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala gives us a very interesting way of looking at this. This is primarily talking to the West, right? Because he was of the camp where it's all about the tangible. If it's not rational, then I don't accept it, etc. Then he said, until I started to wonder, when I have a coin right in front of me, remember coins? Remember that? If I had a coin right in front of me and put it next to the sun in the sky, the coin would seem bigger. The coin, to me, would look bigger. Yet I know the sun is much bigger. I'm looking at the coin and I'm looking at the sun. But there are other elements that skew the reality, like how close the object is to you. So from there, he asked the question, how much can I really trust my senses? How much can I really rely on it? To what extent? So Islam is about the balance, right? We believe the Prophet ﷺ is a prophet who Allah spoke to either directly or through Jibreel alayhi salam or through dreams. Why? Because the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam came with miracles. And what a miracle is, what it means is it defies scientific law. Meaning we know for sure this action cannot be performed by a human being. The Prophet is a human being, right? So if the Prophet ﷺ, who is a human being, is doing something or things that human beings cannot do, then the only explanation is Allah, the one who can defy science or manipulate it to his will, is the one who did it. Right? So Musa ﷺ had a stick, he would throw it, and what? It becomes a living organism. An inanimate object immediately transforms into a living entity that breathes, that lives, that acts. And then when he calls it back, it turns back to an inanimate object. This isn't magic. This is miraculous. Isa alayhi salam would go to a dead individual and say, "Qum bismillah," stand up by the will of Allah, in the name of Allah, and they would come back to life. Right? Human beings cannot do this. And of course, the Prophet ﷺ has his miracles, the greatest of them being the Quran. This isn't the language of a human being. Right? This isn't the speech of a human being. The Arabs understood this immediately because it's their language. We kind of have to work very hard in order to reach this. So, Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala begins by discussing wahi. Why? Because there are questions around it. People are asking questions. Well, how do I know that the Prophet ﷺ was actually getting revelation, Jibreel was actually coming to him, versus he was just somebody who was schizophrenic, or somebody who hallucinated, or somebody who was just making it up? Right? So, here Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha says that, we're at hadith number 2 of Bukhari, or the summary of Bukhari, the abridged version. Al-Harith ibn Hisham radiallahu ta'ala an asked the Prophet ﷺ, how did wahi come to you? So the Prophet ﷺ said, sometimes it would come to me like a ringing chain. You know chains, metal, how they have link and link and link and link? Like a ringing chain. How is it? Imagine taking that chain and dragging it on concrete. It makes a noise, right? It's it's annoying noise. It's not pleasant to the ears. So the Prophet ﷺ describes one way wahi came to him in this way. And he said, this was the most difficult on me, when it would come this way. What was the noise that he was really hearing? Well, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals something, when he speaks, all the angels hear it. And in their awe of Allah and in their khushu', they would fall into a state of just submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in that state, their wings will begin to flap very quickly. That's the noise that the Prophet ﷺ was hearing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alludes to this in Surah As-Saba, right? حَتَّى إِذَا فُزِّعَ عَنْ قُلُوبِهِمْ قَالُوا مَاذَا قَالَ رَبُّكُمْ قَالُوا الْحَقِّ. Right? So when Allah would speak, the angels would hear this, and of course Allah's words are of the greatest beauty. And so it cannot but captivate the individual in a way that causes that reaction. So in their grandeur of Allah, their awe of Allah and khushu', their wings will begin to flap very quickly, and that's what the Prophet ﷺ was hearing. Now, why would this happen? Perhaps to grab the Prophet ﷺ's attention. So there are people around him, right? He's looking, he's taking care of this, he's doing that, he's making sure things are running well over here, he's being asked by so-and-so or so-and-so. Now revelation is about to come to him. He has to shut all of that out. And so perhaps the reason why it would come in this very difficult, burdensome way upon the Prophet ﷺ is to make sure he's 100% focused on the Prophet ﷺ and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or Jibreel or what's being revealed to him. Now the companions would know when wahi was coming to the Prophet ﷺ, especially when it's coming to him through this form. They would see his face, the pressure on his face. They would see him sweat. In fact, once his head was on the lap of a fellow companion, and a revelation came down to him. And that companion said it was so heavy that I could barely bear it. Like he wanted to scream in pain for how heavy it was, how much pressure was coming on him. And once revelation came to him while he was riding on a camel. And the camel could not stay standing. Imagine a camel, right? Could not stay standing. It fell down from the weight of the wahi. So the companions would know when the Prophet ﷺ was receiving wahi. There is a tangible effect on him. There is a physical reaction. So when something is purely mental, yes, if it's strong enough, it could have it could cause health problems or health reactions, right? But when somebody's paranoid, when somebody's schizophrenic, you don't really see that. It's kind of all in their mind. They're just making it up in their mind, and it just comes out in their behaviors. But for them to actually experience physical pain that's real, that's a whole different thing. So here the Prophet ﷺ was physically experiencing this. He wasn't simply mentally experiencing this. And this is how we differentiate somebody who has mental problems, somebody who's making it up. If somebody's making all of this up, he's not going to have this reaction. Right? What he will do is the following, and some, Sufis will do this. Allah has told my heart X, Y, and Z. So-and-so is cheating. And everybody's, oh, wow, right? Well, what do you mean? You could have just made that up, right? You just put your head down like this. You could be acting that. Versus being on a camel and the camel being crushed by the weight of wahi. Right? The Prophet can't do that. He can't just suddenly make his weight so much more that a camel can't hold it. He can't just suddenly make himself sweat. You see what I mean? So this would be visible. فَيَفْصِمُ عَنِّي وَقَدْ وَعَيْتُ مِنْهُ مَا قَالَ. So once the wahi reaches the Prophet ﷺ and it's fully revealed to him, this effect, the ringing would stop, and the Prophet ﷺ would understand what has come to him. Right? وَأَحْيَانًا, so that's one way. Another way, sometimes يَتَمَثَّلُ لِي الْمَلَكُ رَجُلًا فَيُكَلِّمُنِي فَأَعِي مَا يَقُولُ. Sometimes Jibreel alayhi salam comes to me in the form of a human being. So Jibreel alayhi salam comes, and he is in the form of a human being and can be seen by other human beings. So there have been times where a man would enter upon the Prophet ﷺ, they'd have a short conversation, and then he would leave. And the Prophet would say to Aisha, that was Jibreel. And he would most often come in the image of a man, a companion named Dihya al-Kalbi. A companion by the name of Dihya. Why? Because he was very handsome. So he would come in that form. You have the very well-known hadith of Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, where Umar radiallahu ta'ala an says, we were sitting with the Prophet ﷺ, and a man out of nowhere comes. Nobody knows who he is. Right? Okay, if nobody knows who he is, then the only logical interpretation is that he's a traveler, which was normal back then. But if he was somebody who lives in the community, he would be known. It's a small community. Okay, we don't know him, that means he's a traveler. But his clothes are perfectly clean. His hair is perfectly clean. Right? لا يرى عليه أثر السفر. You cannot see the consequences of traveling on the person. So there's a contradiction. Right? So he comes, sits next to the Prophet ﷺ, starts asking him questions, and then he leaves. And the Prophet tells Umar, do you know who that was? Umar says, no. He says, that was Jibreel ﷺ. So he would be seen. That's another way the Prophet ﷺ would receive revelation. And there are other ways as well as we go through this. Another way is Jibreel ﷺ in his angelic form, as an angel. Such as when he went and did Isra and Mi'raj, he saw Jibreel alayhi salam in his actual form, and in the very early revelation, the first set of revelation that came, he came in his actual form. So the Prophet ﷺ saw Jibreel alayhi salam in his actual form twice, as far as I'm aware. Okay, continuing, hadith number 3. And Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha قالت أول ما بدأ به رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الرؤيا الصالحة في النوم فكان لا يرى رؤيا إلا جاءت مثل فلق الصبح ثم حبب إليه الخلاء. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha says that the first type of revelation that came to the Prophet ﷺ was true dreams. Now, we as Muslims, we believe that some dreams are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are three types of dreams that any person can see. A dream that's from Allah. What does that mean from Allah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing this person something that either is a glad tiding of something good to come, glad tiding that something they did was accepted, or Allah is warning them of something. And warnings, if Allah is warning you of something, that means He cares enough about you to caution you, which is a glad tiding. So when a dream is from Allah, it's always something good, even though it might be alluding to something difficult coming, like you're going to go through a major difficulty. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing you this to give you that steadfastness. So it's a type of glad tiding. So one form of dream is from Allah. The other is from ourselves, our subconscious. Right? You dream something and it's kind of like a movie. You're here, you're there. It has no meaning. Something you're thinking about. When a person is stressed out, they'll dream over the things they're stressing over, etc. It has no meaning, right? It's just a dream. And the third type of dream is from the shaitan, what we call nightmares, right? What we call nightmares. And the Prophet ﷺ teaches us how to react to each one. If it's a dream from Allah, remember it's glad tidings. Allah wants you to raise your morale. He wants you to be more optimistic. He wants to put optimism in your life, right? So the Prophet ﷺ says, if you have a dream from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then only tell it to the people you love. To the people you love. Under the assumption that they love you as well. They care about you as well. Why? Because people get jealous. So if you say a dream to somebody who's jealous, it might open a door of animosity that didn't need to happen in the first place, right? So only tell the people you love. In terms of dreams from yourself, it's meaningless. Don't worry about it. That which is from the shaitan, nightmares, the Prophet ﷺ tells us, don't talk about it, don't mention it to anybody. Why? What is the shaitan trying to do to you? He's trying to make you afraid or sad. Right? He's trying to put you in a negative emotional state to drain you. So if I see a nightmare and I go about talking about it, that means I'm thinking about it. And if I'm thinking about it, I'm worrying over it. And if I'm worrying over it, then that's when the shaitan's poison begins to take effect. So the Prophet ﷺ says, ignore it entirely. فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَضُرُّكَ, because it will not harm you. Right? So when it comes to nightmares, we don't talk about it to anybody. Right? That's for the average person. For the prophets, however, anything a prophet sees is revelation from Allah. It has to be revelation from Allah. Why? Well, if we are to say that the prophets can dream subconsciously, or the shaitan can show them dreams, who's to say that what the Prophet ﷺ is doing, promoting, or claiming to be revelation isn't actually the whispers of the shaitan? You see what I mean here? If the shaitan can affect the dreams of prophets, then doesn't that beg the question of whether he can affect the mental process of the prophet? So when he says a hadith, well, maybe it's the shaitan telling him that. If he gets revelation, well, maybe it's the shaitan telling him this. So the prophets are protected from the effects of the shayateen. And it has to be that way. So those who come and say that the dream Ibrahim alayhi salam saw about slaughtering Ismail alayhi salam, no, that was actually from the shaitan, but Ibrahim alayhi salam misinterpreted it and thought it was from Allah, but in reality it was from the shaitan, you're opening up a much more problematic door. If Ibrahim was deceived by the shaitan, how do we know that what he claimed to be from Allah was actually from Allah? Right? So they try to avoid one problem, and that is the problem of Allah telling somebody to kill their son, and they open up an even more problematic problem. And that is whether Ibrahim a.s. is actually a prophet, or is he deceived by the shaitan? In fact, it challenges all of prophethood. So we say prophets cannot be affected by the shayateen. And so anything they dream of is wahi, is revelation. Now, as far as I'm aware, the Prophet ﷺ never received Quran through a dream. There are hadith that came to him through dreams. We know this for sure. But a verse of the Quran is not through a dream. It's only through either Jibreel alayhi or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to him directly or to his heart. But nonetheless, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will communicate information to the Prophet through dreams. Again, it doesn't come out in the form of the Quran, it comes out maybe through hadith or something else. All right? So prior to becoming a prophet, the Prophet ﷺ all of a sudden started to see dreams. And when he saw a dream, it would come exactly to life as he saw it. So he would dream of something, and the thing that he dreamed of would happen exactly as he saw it. Exactly. And this was happening 6 months prior to receiving revelation. And as this was happening, it seems like it created a type of confusion for the Prophet ﷺ. Some sort of emotional distress. Why? I don't know. Maybe he felt that this is something bizarre. Right? I see something in my dream, and then all of a sudden it happens in real life. And so with that, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha says that the Prophet started to be more fond of isolation. Al-khala. He would isolate himself just to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is when he starts going to Ghar Hira. He goes to Ghar Hira and he would spend a month there. Right? And Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha would go and send him food, and sometimes he'd come down, take a shower, get some more food and go back. So these two are coinciding. فَكَانَ يَخْلُو بِغَارِ حِرَاءٍ فَيَتَحَنَّثُ فِيهِ. So he would just worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have the dreams going on. Another part of his emotional distress was just the reality of Quraysh. The immorality, the worshipping of other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the oppressing of the elites towards or against the weaker parts of society, etc. So he was very unfond and discontent with the realities of his people. So he would go to Ghar Hira and he would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there. حَتَّى جَاءَهُ الْحَقِّ وَهُوَ فِي غَارِ حِرَاء. Until Jibreel alayhi salam came to him while he was in Ghar Hira. And it coincided with Ramadan. And in fact, it coincided with Laylatul Qadr. So when the Prophet ﷺ received the first verses, it was in Ramadan, and it was Laylatul Qadr. Right? How do we know this? Well, the Quran mentions this. إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ فِي لَيْلَةِ الْقَدْرِ. We sent it down on the day of Qadr. Right? The night of Qadr. Also in Surah Dukhan, إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ فِي لَيْلَةٍ مُبَارَكَةٍ. We sent it down, the first revelation, in a blessed night, meaning the Laylatul Qadr. So Jibreel alayhi salam comes to the Prophet while he is in human form. Now this startles the Prophet alayhi salam, who's coming up here. And if somebody's coming up here, it would have to be someone from Quraysh. And I don't know this person. And this man, right, or who the Prophet alayhi salam thought was a man, فَقَالْ اقْرَأ, said, اقْرأ, read. قَالْ مَا أَنَا بِقَارِئٍ. The Prophet alayhi salam said, I don't read, I'm illiterate. Now there's another way of understanding this. Iqra can mean read. It can also mean recite, pronounce, proclaim. So if we understand Iqra to mean read, then the Prophet's response, Ma ana biqari, means I don't know how to read, I'm illiterate. But if we understand Iqra to mean recite, then here it means Ma ana biqari, it's a question. What do you want me to say? Right? So Jibreel alayhi salam goes to the Prophet and he covers him and he, pulls tight on him. Right? He hugs him very tightly. حتى بلغ مني الجهد, until I almost suffocated. Right? I became very concerned. ثم أرسلني, then he let me go. And he said, اقرأ, read. ما أنا بقارئ, the same response from the Prophet ﷺ. What do you want me to read? Or what do you want me to say? فغطني الثانية حتى بلغ مني الجهد. So Jibreel goes and he squeezes him again until the Prophet ﷺ was in physical pain. And then Jibreel said again, read or recite. And the Prophet said, what do you want me to read? What do you want me to recite? And then he came and he squeezed him again, a third time. And then this time he said, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. The first verses of the Quran. Now, I want you all to ponder for just a second here, the following. Remember that the Prophet ﷺ, this is the greatest man to walk this earth. And he was given the greatest message. And this movement will change the course of human history. And it will launch, this is launching now, the legacy of the greatest people humanity will ever see. Okay? Now, if you were tasked this role, right, your job was to launch this movement. And now you have to start this. What would be the first thing you would tell the person who's going to carry on this task? You understand my question? What would be the first thing you would tell them? Well, when I ask this question, people say, I'll say, okay, worship Allah. Or La ilaha illallah, none is worthy of worship except Allah. Or pray your prayers, or there's an afterlife, or etc. Okay, well, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Right. Recite in the name of your Lord, the one who created. He created humanity from a clot of blood. Recite, and your Lord is most gracious, the one who taught with the pen. He taught humanity what they don't know. It's like, okay. When we listen to this, it's like, what does this even mean? Like, if you give me Ayatul Kursi, we get it, right? It's glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and it's teaching us about who Allah is, but what is this? Recite in the name of your Lord? Recite in the name of your Lord, the one who created. Notice, the name Allah is not even here. Allah is not even here. Tawheed is not even here. What is going on here? Well, what's going on here? Okay, there's a lot going on the Zoom. Just want to make sure everything is okay. Right? People Hadith, okay. All right. If I go, like you don't hear me anymore or anything like that, somebody speak or else I won't notice. Okay? What's going on here? Let me try and sum it up. Essentially, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet, and by extension humanity, do not be surprised that Allah is communicating to humanity. Don't be surprised by this. Why? Because the one who created your physical selves and took care of your physical selves the way He did. What do you need to survive? You need oxygen, you need food, you need. Okay, all of this is functioning without you having to do anything. Your body continues, your biology, your physiology, your anatomy continues to astonish researchers, however many millennia human beings have been on earth. It still continues to astonish you. Your body works without you having to do anything. Your brain is firing signals, and your veins or your nerves are firing signals, and you're breathing, and that oxygen is being converted into energy and food. All of this is going on. And Allah created it in a way where He's taking care of your physical selves, right? Anybody who even begins to ponder this realizes how fascinating of a universe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. Allah created it that way because He's taking care of you. Now the question is, what's more important? Your physical selves or your spiritual selves? Meaning your souls. What's more important? Your souls. So, if Allah has put so much detail and so much into taking care of your physical selves, do you not think He's going to do more to take care of your spiritual selves? So Allah's talking to you. He's sending you revelation. Nothing surprising about it, right? So that's one of the primary points here. The other point is to show the relationship. Allah created you, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ عَلَقٍ. He created you to have a relationship with Him. He wants a relationship with you, and it is of human fitrah to want to have a relationship with Allah. And so Allah says He created you from a clot of blood, and you evolved, or you developed from a clot of blood into a zygote, into a fetus, into an embryo, into a fetus, into a child. And you are born, and you grow, and you grow, and you grow. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has employed an adult male, an adult female to take care of you and to spend all of their energy and their time and their resources for you, right? All that detail. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you two things that make you unique in comparison to everything else, right? الَّذِي عَلَّمَ بِالْقَلَمِ. He taught you how to use the pen. Well, what is the pen useful for? What do you use a pen for? To write. What are you writing? A language. Okay, are you just writing random letters? No, you're writing down information. So the pen symbolizes language and it symbolizes knowledge. Because you write knowledge, information that you want to communicate to somebody else, right? Or else if you're just writing and you know nobody else will ever read this, not even yourself, is there a point of writing it? So Allah is saying He taught you to use the pen. In other words, what that means is He gave you two very unique capabilities. The capacity or the capability to speak and communicate to each other, and the capability of learning and knowledge. Right? Why did He create that for you? Why did He give that for you? So that you can learn who Allah is. Allah is using language to communicate to you, to build a relationship. And He's giving you information, giving you knowledge to get to know who He is. And He opened the door of dua so that you can always communicate to Him. That's what Allah is telling us here. Right? And another thing He says, اقرأ وربك الأكرم. Your Lord is most gracious. I mean, if you think Allah is the most gracious, then how does that graciousness manifest? Just by giving you apples and vegetables for you to eat? Is that really gracious to Allah's standard? No, Allah is more gracious than that. Rather, He's going to give you revelation, give you a book for you to guide yourself using, to find guidance in, to make your life that much easier, that much more pleasurable. So I hope now you understand why these are the first verses to come down, right? So Jibreel alayhi salam reveals these verses to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, what's the Prophet's reaction? How do you think a human being is going to react when this happens? Right? Some random person, let's just be real here, some guy came in with a MAGA hat, like a Trump hat. What's going to happen to us? Why is this person here? It's going to be concerning, right? The Prophet just found this random person comes to him and starts squeezing him and telling him very strange things. If the Prophet is honest, if the human being is honest, then their natural reaction would be fear. But if the person is making this up, what would their reaction be? If somebody's just making this up for fame, for prestige, for status, they'll just go and say, hey everybody, Knowledge has come to me. I am a prophet. You have to follow me. And they're happy, they're excited that they're actually launching their lifelong goal. You see what I mean here? So the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was afraid, and Aisha says, يَرْجُفُ فُؤَادُهُ, he was shaken to the core. His heart was pounding. That's how afraid he was. This tells us from human psychology that he's not making this up. This isn't something he's been plotting and planning since he's a young man. It's okay, man, when am I going to get my chance for fame? If he's plotting and planning this, why would he be afraid? If this is just some sort of paranoia, why would he be afraid? If he's imagining this, why would he be afraid? So the fact that he was afraid tells us that, this is, can you hear me on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it tells us that he's being honest. So the Prophet ﷺ naturally gets out of Ghar Hira, quickly descends the mountain. Now, if you were just stricken by tremendous fear, well, where would you go?
The closest person to you.
Right?
Go to a person that knows you well, that
Right? You're going to go to the person who you can trust, who you think is going to support you. So who does the Prophet ﷺ go to? His wife Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha. Because he knows that's where he's going to find his nourishment and his safety. And he enters. Now, women have this intuition where they can quickly detect the emotional state of anybody walking by, especially their husbands, right, and their children. They can tell there's something going on. No matter how much he tries to act, forget it. Right? She has that intuition. So clearly, and the Prophet ﷺ has 4 daughters, right? If one of them missed it, somebody else is going to see it. The Prophet enters the home. And naturally, these homes are small. So naturally, they're immediately going to notice the Prophet ﷺ is distressed. But what's the first interaction that happens? The Prophet ﷺ says, "Zammiluni, zammiluni." Cover me, cover me. Right? Now, again, let's be real. The best way we learn from these stories, the life of the Prophet, is when we make it relevant to our times. We see how we fit into this. If your husband or your child is coming in and they're afraid and they have this blank look in their face, right? And they say, cover me, what's the first reaction you're going to have? What happened? What's going on? No, tell me first. That's how we would react, right? No, that's not how they reacted. They quickly and immediately covered him without asking. And by the way, when you read books about marital relationships, this is the advice that they give, especially to wives. When you see your husband, right, going into their cave, as one author calls it. When a man is distressed, they disconnect. They isolate. Just like the Prophet ﷺ. He isolated himself. There's something bothering the man. If he doesn't have a solution to it, that's what stresses him out. And when he doesn't have a solution, he feels he needs to isolate, disconnect. Why? Because a man wants to feel competent, independent, autonomous. That's where he gets his manlyhood from, right? But the woman is the opposite. When she's feeling distressed, she wants to connect. She wants to vent. She wants to speak. So the woman will misinterpret the man, thinking that he's actually becoming distant from her, that he doesn't trust her. When in all actuality, he's just behaving like a man. It has nothing to do with her. And the man, of course, when she's distressed and she's venting, he thinks she's blaming him. And he becomes defensive. When in all actuality, she's just looking for support. Khadija and the Prophet, Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha and the Prophet alayhi salam, they understood each other. She understood, radiallahu ta'ala anha, that the Prophet as a man, if he was isolating himself, he's just trying to figure things out. Has nothing to do with her. So when he would go for a month right? Consecutive months to Ghar Hira. She wouldn't guilt trip him. She wouldn't say, where are you going? Why are you going there? Why won't you talk to me? Rather, she would go up and bring him the supplies and then leave him be. Understanding that when he figures it out, he will naturally come back to her. So a man is like a rubber band, with the lady kind of being that force, that pull. That's a center. Sometimes he's near when he's relaxed, but when he's stressed out, he begins to disconnect a little bit. But like a rubber band, when that tension, that pressure is removed, he'll naturally come back. Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha understood this. So when the Prophet came back and started saying, Zammiluni, Zammilun, cover me, cover me, what did he do? What did the Khadija do? Immediately covered him, knowing that when he relaxes, when he calms down, he himself will be ready to speak on his own. Whereas if she were to come and say, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong, the man becomes defensive. Just leave me alone. Like, I don't want to talk about it now. I'm not ready. Right? Don't start poking away at my autonomy. And that's exactly what happened. فَزَمَّلُوهُ حَتَّى ذَهَبَ عَنْهُ الرَّوْعَ. So they covered him. She emotionally comforted him, supported him, until the fear left. He became emotionally stable again. Right? فَقَالَ لِخَدِيجَةَ. He himself said to Khadija anha, لَقَدْ خَشِيتُ عَلَى نَفْسِي. I'm afraid for myself. Right? Meaning, I'm afraid I'm going crazy. They believed in the jinn and this stuff, and they didn't let jinn play games. Right? So the Prophet thought he was hallucinating. He's going crazy. And Khadija, the star wife, the model wife, right? He knew exactly how to react. She didn't say, why do you say that? How come? Explain yourself. How come you didn't talk to me first? You should have done this. I told you, oh, you're going out there all alone. This is going to happen to you. What did she say? She said, Kalla wallahi ma yukhzika Allahu abadan. She said, by Allah, no way Allah will ever humiliate you. She supported him. And then she explains why. She didn't just tell him words, because he might say, you're just supporting me, right? No, she backed it up. Innaka la tasilu rahim. No, Allah will never humiliate you. Why? Khadija tells him why Allah would never humiliate him. Well, number one, you take care of your family, right? Your extended family. وَتَحْمِلُ الْكَلِّ. And you support the weak people of society. وَتَكْسِبُ الْمَعْدُومِ. And you host people who have no one, right? You're there for people who are lonely. And I want to translate it that way. That's not exactly what Khadija is saying. It's not about loneliness, but rather you have somebody traveling, or somebody who's an orphan, or somebody who doesn't have a tribe. They're foreign, so to speak. The Prophet would host them. He would be friends with them. In our times today, the problem is loneliness. People are so lonely because of just the way things are, and relationships are very weak, etc. وَتَقْرِي الضَّيْفِ. And you're hospitable to your guests. وَتُعِينُ عَلَى نَوَائِبِ الْحَقِّ. And you support good causes. You support true causes. 5 things. She knew her husband very well, right? And she knew that no way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would punish somebody who has these characteristics. Now we could take this and look at ourselves. Which of these do I apply? Now in our times today, hosting people is very rare. Like, everybody's on their own, doing their own thing. If you host somebody, it tends to be just a family member. And we're so busy, we barely find time to be with our family, let alone spend time with people who need a friend. Anyway, but these are 5 things. But what we're really good at as American Muslims is participating in good causes. We are like that. We're very good at participating in good causes. Alhamdulillah. But Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha didn't stop there. فَانْطَلَقَتْ بِهِ خَدِيجَةُ حَتَّى أَتَتْ وَرَقَةَ بْنَ نَوْفَلٍ. Khadija then took him to her cousin Waraqa. And Waraqa was an old man, and his vision was very weak. They called him blind. And he was a Christian, right? Tanassara. He became a Christian. But his Christianity was true Christianity. the belief in one God, the true message of Isa alayhi salam. And so Khadija tells, Waraqa, listen to what my husband has to say. And so the Prophet explains to Waraqa what happened. And Waraqa, being a scholar of Christianity, he knows this stuff. He knows prophethood, he knows Jibreel alayhi salam, he knows how these things work. And he knows how to differentiate between the words of the shaitan and the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So immediately Waraqa recognized that the one who came to the Prophet was an-Namus, the angel, the bearer of good news. Namus means the one who bears good news. The one who went to Musa alayhi salam, meaning the one who gave revelation to Musa, Jibreel alayhi salam, that's the one who came to you and spoke these words. And then Waraqa says, I wish I was younger so that I can protect you when your people oust you. Now, this is a tribal society. It is the biggest cultural betrayal to oust one of your own. No, they were in the opposite extreme. We will protect one of our own even if we know they're wrong. If we know one of our own murdered somebody else, we will protect them, because that's tribalism. So the Prophet alayhi salam, hearing this, my people will oust me, that goes against everything tribalism preached at that time. And on top of that, the Prophet was beloved by his people. As-Sadiq al-Amin, the truthful and the trustworthy. So this was, to him, this was more shocking than the fact that the one who came to him was Jibreel alayhi salam. So notice his reaction. My people will oust me out. And this is a very important point, because we see this happening today, don't we? America, the West, all about human rights, and all about, civility, and always for peace against war, and all of this stuff. And then you see Israel, all of that down the drain. What happened? What happened? What happened to all the human rights, and all the civility, and all the diplomacy, and all the wanting of peace, and all the compassion towards the innocents? What happened to all of that? And we Muslims are sitting there in shock. In fact, the entire world is looking in shock. And I'm hearing this left and right from people in the East. As they say in Arabic. All this democracy, human rights stuff, it's all lies. It all turned out to be lies. Right? I mean, I wouldn't go to that extent, but it turned out to be that when personal interest comes in tension with principles, most of humanity will take their personal interest. Just like Quraysh. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ had to deal with that. Okay, we'll go ahead and... Actually, one more point. After the first revelation came, there was a pause in revelation. Meaning, the first revelation came, and then a period of time passed before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down another set of revelation. Some say it was 2 weeks, some say it was a month, 2 months, 3 months, and the highest, the longest, scholars have said was 2 years. I think that's very long. But nonetheless, there is a pause in revelation. And I think it's mentioned in an upcoming hadith, so we'll leave it for that. We'll stop at hadith number 4. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.